The gunshots echoed across Josiah Graves's land before he saw the smoke. 3 shots, sharp, deliberate, then silence. He pulled the reins hard, turning his horse toward the water trough near the eastern fence. His right hand found the grip of his Colt Peacemaker without thinking. The war had been over for 14 years, but his body still remembered how to prepare for violence. The afternoon sun burned against his back as he rode. Texas heat in autumn, 1879. Unforgiving, relentless. Like everything else in this God-forsaken territory near the Pecos River. Josiah crested the small ridge above his property and saw them. 3 men on horseback, circling a woman near the water trough. She stood with her back against the wooden post, a knife in her hand, her long black hair whipping in the hot wind. One man already lay in the dust, blood pooling beneath him. Apache. The woman was Apache. Her dress marked her as mescalero, the beadwork distinctive even from this distance. One of the men laughed. The sound carried across the dry air like a curse. "Mr. Dietrich wants you alive," the man called out. "But he didn't say nothing about you being in one piece." The woman didn't respond. She shifted her weight, knife ready, waiting for whichever man moved first. Josiah didn't wait. He drew his Colt and fired twice from 35 yards. The first shot took the laughing man through the chest. The second dropped his companion before the first body hit the ground. Clean shots. The kind that came from years of practice in a war that had taught him exactly where to aim. The woman spun toward him, knife raised, eyes wild with the instinct of someone who had learned not to trust rescue. Josiah holstered his weapon slowly. He raised both hands where she could see them. "This is my land," he said. "Those men were trespassing." She studied him for a long moment. Her breathing was ragged, but her hand remained steady on the knife. Blood spattered her sleeve. Not hers. The man she had killed. "I need nothing from you," she said. Then she dropped to her knees and began digging through the dirt near the water trough. Josiah watched her. She wasn't searching for a weapon. She wasn't looking for money or supplies. Her fingers clawed at the earth with a desperation that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with loss. He dismounted and walked toward her. She tensed but didn't stop digging. "What are you looking for?" he asked. She didn't answer. Josiah crouched beside her, keeping enough distance that she wouldn't feel threatened. He watched her hands, the way they trembled, despite her efforts to control them. Whatever she had lost, it mattered more to her than the men who had tried to capture her. He began sifting through the dirt alongside her, without asking again. 10 minutes passed. The sun crawled lower. The bodies of the dead men attracted flies. His fingers touched something smooth and cool beneath the surface. He pinched it carefully and lifted it from the earth. A silver ring, thin, delicate. Apache designs carved into the band with the precision of someone who had loved the person who would wear it. The woman froze when she saw it, her eyes fixed on the ring with an intensity that made Josiah's chest tighten. He had seen that look before. In the faces of soldiers who had lost everything except one small object that connected them to who they used to be. He held the ring out on his open palm. He didn't move toward her. He let her come to him. She reached slowly, her fingers closing around the silver band. For a moment, the hardness in her face cracked. Just a moment. Then the walls rebuilt themselves. "My mother told me," she said, her voice dry and controlled, "that the man who finds this ring will take me as his wife." She looked at him with something between challenge and exhaustion. She never said anything about whether I would agree.
"You can rest here tonight. No one owns you on my land."
Land doesn't stop bullets. Why are you helping me?
"Because I've seen what it looks like when nobody does."
Josiah stood and brushed the dirt from his knees. "I'm not looking for a wife," he said, "but those men came from somewhere, and whoever sent them will send more. You can stay the night. Rest. Figure out your next move." She considered his words. He could see her weighing the risks, calculating the possibilities. A woman who had learned to survive by trusting no one. "My name is Kaya," she said finally. "Josiah Graves." She slipped the ring onto a leather cord around her neck, tucking it beneath her dress where it would rest against her heart. Then she stood, retrieved her knife, and followed him toward the ranch house. The fire crackled between them as night settled over the land. Josiah had given Kaya the cabin. He sat on the porch, his back against the wooden post, his Winchester rifle across his knees. The stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. She emerged from the cabin after an hour. She sat on the porch steps, far enough from him to maintain distance, close enough to share the warmth of the small fire he had built in the pit. "Those men," she said, "they work for a man named Harlan Dietrich." Josiah nodded slowly. He knew the name. Everyone in this territory knew the name. Dietrich ran the trading post 40 miles east. A businessman, people called him, a man who had built his fortune on the chaos that followed the war. "He claims my father owed him money," Kaya continued. "He says I belong to him now. Payment for the debt." "Did your father owe him?" "No." Her voice hardened like steel cooling in water. "My father was a chief. He owed nothing to any white man. Dietrich wants something else. Something my father hid before he died." She fell silent. Josiah didn't press her. He had learned long ago that people shared their stories when they were ready, not when they were pushed. The fire popped. Sparks rose into the darkness and disappeared against the stars. "My father spent 2 years gathering evidence," Kaya said finally. "Dietrich sells guns to the Comancheros, rifles, ammunition. He trades with raiders who attack settlers and steal cattle and take women. My father documented everything, names, dates, shipments. He planned to give the evidence to the army at Fort Davis." "What happened?" "The fever took him 6 months ago. He never made the journey." She touched the ring beneath her dress. "I am the only one who knows where he hid the evidence. That is why Dietrich wants me." Josiah absorbed her words. "Gun running to Comancheros." That explained the violence. That explained why Dietrich would send armed men after a single woman across 40 miles of open country. "The ring," he said, "it was your mother's?" "She died when I was 12. The fever, like my father. This ring is all I have left of her." Kaya's fingers traced the outline of the band through the fabric of her dress. "She used to tell me that a woman's strength isn't in running or fighting. It's in choosing when to do each." The words hung in the air between them. "You live alone," Kaya said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" Josiah stared into the flames. The question touched something he had buried deep, something he had spent 8 years trying to forget in this isolated patch of Texas dirt. "I had a brother," he said. "Daniel. He was 18 when he died. Followed me into the war even though I told him to stay home. He said he couldn't let me fight alone." Josiah paused. The memory cut like broken glass. "He was killed at Chickamauga, September 1863. I heard the shots, ran toward them, found him bleeding in the mud, held him while he died, couldn't save him." Kaya didn't offer sympathy. She didn't tell him she was sorry. Instead, she said, "You did not kill your brother. The man who fired the shot killed him." Simple words, direct, but something in them cut through the guilt that had wrapped itself around Josiah's heart since that terrible night. He looked at her. She met his gaze without flinching. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." She rose and walked toward the cabin door. She paused with her hand on the frame. "Thank you," she said, "for finding the ring." Then she
3 riders circled in the night.
They were watching, not hunting.
Then we make it expensive for them to come back.
Yeah. You talk like a soldier.
disappeared inside. And Josiah was left alone with the fire and the stars and the weight of memories he couldn't escape. Morning arrived with the smell of dust and sage. Josiah found Kaya already awake, crouched near the eastern fence, studying the ground with intense concentration. Her fingers traced patterns in the dirt that meant nothing to him but clearly spoke volumes to her. 3 horses, she said, without looking up. They passed through last night, watching, not attacking. He knelt beside her. She pointed to the tracks, showing him the depth, the spacing, the direction. The hoof prints led toward and away from the ranch in a deliberate circuit. "They know you're here," she said. "They're waiting for reinforcements. Then we should fix that fence before they come back." She looked at him, surprised by the practical response. He gestured toward the section of fencing that had collapsed during the last storm, posts leaning at angles that would let any determined animal or man through. "Can't defend a ranch with broken barriers," he said. They worked side by side for 2 hours. Josiah dug post holes with a rusted shovel, while Kaya strung wire with hands that knew exactly how much tension to apply. They didn't speak much, but their movements found a rhythm. She anticipated which tools he needed before he reached for them. He adjusted his pace to match hers without thinking about it. Two people who had spent their lives alone, discovering they could work together without friction. The sun had reached its peak when the riders appeared. 6 men crested the ridge to the south. They rode in formation, spread wide, blocking any escape route toward the open country. At their center, mounted on a black stallion that cost more than most men earned in a year, sat a man Josiah recognized immediately. Harlan Dietrich. He was tall and lean, his silver hair slicked back beneath a wide-brimmed hat of expensive felt. He wore the clothes of a gentleman, a pressed white shirt, a tailored gray vest, polished boots that had never seen honest work. But his eyes held no warmth. They were the eyes of a rattlesnake watching a mouse. Josiah walked to the front of his property. He didn't reach for his weapon. Not yet. 6 against 1 were bad odds, and he needed to know what Dietrich wanted before bullets started flying. Dietrich stopped his horse 20 feet from the fence. "Mr. Graves," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly wrong for this territory of dust and blood. "I understand you have a guest, a young woman who belongs to me. I don't see anyone here who belongs to you. Her father owed me a considerable debt, $300 for supplies and goods. The girl is collateral. Debts don't make people property, not on my land." Dietrich smiled. The expression didn't reach his eyes. "You're a reasonable man, Graves. I can tell. A man who understands how things work out here. Let me make this simple. Give me the woman, and I'll forget about the 3 men you killed yesterday. Refuse, and things become complicated." Josiah held his ground. "Those men were trying to hurt someone on my property. I defended what's mine. That's how things work on my land." "What's yours?" Dietrich laughed softly. "A rundown ranch in the middle of nowhere? 30 head of cattle? A cabin that leaks when it rains? Mr. Graves, you have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." The smile faded from Dietrich's face. He studied Josiah with new interest, the way a man might study a dog that had suddenly shown teeth. "Before I leave," Dietrich said, "I should mention something. I have an associate who's very eager to meet you again. His name is Virgil Crane. Does that ring any bells?" Josiah felt his blood turn to ice. Virgil Crane. The name crashed through his memory like a bullet through glass. Virgil had served under him at Chickamauga. Virgil had been there the night Daniel died. Virgil was supposed to be dead, killed in the same ambush that took his brother. "I see it does," Dietrich said. "Virgil has waited a long time for this reunion, Graves. He has stories to tell you. Stories about that night in September 1863. Stories about what really happened to your brother." Dietrich turned his horse and rode away. His men followed, leaving dust clouds hanging in the still air like ghosts. Josiah stood frozen. His hands trembled at his sides. For all these years since Chickamauga, he had carried the weight of his brother's death. He had blamed himself for not being fast enough, strong enough, good enough to save Daniel. Now Virgil Crane had risen from the grave, and he had stories to tell. The sandstorm hit late that afternoon. Wind roared down from the western mountains, turning the sky brown and thick with swirling grit. Visibility dropped to nothing. The world beyond
Who is the man they mentioned, the one from your enemy?
A ghost with a name.
Names don't die out here. I have my own ghost.
Then we don't run from them. We make them face daylight.
10 feet became a wall of moving sand that scoured exposed skin and choked the lungs. Josiah and Kaya retreated to the cabin as the storm battered the walls. He barred the windows with wooden slats while she stuffed cloth into the gaps beneath the door. Sand hissed against the roof like 1,000 angry whispers. They sat on opposite sides of the small room as night fell. The lamp between them cast dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm screamed. "Who is Virgil Crane?" Kaya asked. Josiah stared at the flame. He had never told anyone the full story. He had buried it so deep he sometimes convinced himself it had happened to someone else, in another life, to another man who shared his name and face but not his soul. "He was a soldier under my command," he said. "Chickamauga, September 1863. We were ambushed at night. Confederate cavalry caught us in a crossfire. Daniel was separated from the group when the shooting started. I heard shots from the wrong direction, shots that weren't part of the main fight. By the time I reached him, he was dying." He stopped, breathed. The The sandstorm howled. Virgil was supposed to be dead beside him. That's what I saw in the darkness. Two bodies. One breathing, one not. I carried Daniel back to our lines, but he bled out before the surgeon could reach him. I went back for Virgil at dawn, but his body was gone. I assumed someone had already buried him. But he wasn't dead. No. The word tasted like ash. He wasn't dead. He's been alive this whole time, and now he works for Dietrich, and he wants to tell me stories about that night. Kaya was quiet for a long moment. The storm pressed against the walls. My mother taught me, she said slowly, that the truth is the sharpest weapon, sharper than any knife or bullet. That is why my father gathered evidence instead of fighting Dietrich directly. He knew that truth, properly used, could destroy what violence could not. She moved closer to the lamp. The light caught her face, revealing exhaustion she had hidden well beneath her composure. My father spent his last years fighting Dietrich the only way he believed would work. He documented every gun sold, every payment made, every raider who came to trade stolen cattle for weapons. He believed that justice existed, even in places like this, even for people like us. Did he find justice? He died before he could deliver it. Her voice carried no self-pity, only the weight of unfinished work. But the evidence still exists, hidden in a cave 12 miles north, in the rocks near Guadalupe Pass. Everything Dietrich has done for the past 5 years, documented and waiting for someone to use it. Josiah looked at her. The lamplight flickered across her features. You want to finish what he started. I want to honor what he believed, and I want Dietrich to face what he has done. She met his eyes. But I understand if you want no part of this. You have your own ghosts. Josiah thought about Daniel, about the years of guilt, about the questions that had never been answered. Virgil Crane has answers I need, he said. Whatever he knows about that night, I have to hear it, even if it destroys everything I thought I understood. Then we have the same enemy. The storm continued through the night. They took turns keeping watch, though neither truly slept. Kaya dozed with her knife in her hand. Josiah sat with his back against the wall, watching the door, listening to the wind, waiting for dawn. When the storm finally broke, the world outside had been scoured clean. The sand had erased old tracks and old patterns. It felt like a new beginning, or maybe an ending. Josiah couldn't tell which. They came at night, 4 days later. 4 of Dietrich's men attacked while the moon hung low and red on the horizon. They set fire to the horse barn first, the flames climbing fast through the dry timber. The blaze drew Josiah and Kaya out of the cabin and into the open, exactly as planned. Josiah grabbed his Winchester and took position behind the water trough. He counted muzzle flashes in the darkness. 4 shooters spread in a half circle around the yard, trying to pin them down while the barn burned. The first man made the mistake of silhouetting himself against the flames. Josiah.
My father wrote all of it. Names, dates, proof.
Proof is a bullet that never runs out.
Josiah's bullet caught him center mass, the 44-40 round punching through ribs and spine. He dropped without a sound. Kaya had retrieved a carbine from one of the dead men days before. She moved like smoke through the shadows, using the dancing firelight to mask her approach. The second shooter never saw her coming. Her shot echoed across the property, and he crumpled beside a fence post. The third man caught Josiah in the arm. The bullet punched through flesh above the elbow and kept going, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. Josiah gritted his teeth, steadied his rifle against the trough, and returned fire. The Winchester kicked against his shoulder. The man's head snapped back. The fourth tried to run. He made it 10 yards before Kaya's carbine barked twice. He fell face first into the dirt and didn't move again. When silence returned, Josiah slumped against the trough. Blood ran down his arm in steady streams, dripping from his fingers into the dust. The barn collapsed in on itself, sending a column of sparks spiraling toward the stars. Kaya appeared beside him, her hands already working to tear cloth for bandages. The bullet went through, she said. No bone. You'll live. Good to know. She wrapped his arm with quick, efficient movements. Her touch was firm but careful. The touch of someone who had treated wounds before, who knew how much pressure stopped bleeding without cutting circulation. Josiah reached into the pocket of the nearest dead man with his good hand. He found a folded letter, the paper stained with blood but still legible in the light of the burning barn. The handwriting was cramped, angry, familiar in a way that made his stomach clench. "I will kill Graves myself," the letter said. "But first he needs to know the truth. He needs to know who really shot his brother that night. He needs to know that the guilt he's carried all these years belongs to someone else. Let him understand before he dies. Let him suffer with the knowledge." Josiah read the words 3 times. His wounded arm forgotten. His pain forgotten. Everything forgotten except the impossible sentence that shattered everything he had believed since Chickamauga. "What is it?" Kaya asked. He handed her the letter. She read it in the dying light of the flames. "Virgil killed Daniel," she said. "Not the enemy, not the ambush. Virgil himself." Josiah couldn't speak. His throat had closed around something sharp and jagged. All these years he had blamed himself. All these years he had lived in exile, punishing himself for a failure that wasn't his failure at all. His brother's killer had been standing beside him the whole time, and he had walked away thinking Virgil was dead, thinking there was no one left to blame but himself. They rode north before dawn, 12 miles through hostile territory, through land where Comancheros raided and traitors dealt in blood and bullets and human lives. Kaya led the way, reading signs invisible to anyone else: bent grass, disturbed stones, the patterns of birds taking flight. She guided them around patrols and through hidden passages in the rocks that no white man had ever mapped. The cave entrance was small, hidden behind a fall of scrub brush and tumbled stone. A man could ride within 20 feet and never know it existed. Inside, the darkness was absolute until Kaya lit a torch from the supplies she had cached months before. A wooden chest sat against the back wall, covered in dust and shadows. Kaya opened it with trembling hands. Inside lay stacks of paper, ledgers filled with careful handwriting, letters bearing official seals, shipping manifests listing rifles by the dozen, ammunition by the case, 2 years of evidence documenting every gun Dietrich had sold, every deal he had made with raiders and murderers, every life his greed had cost. Josiah lifted a yellowed envelope from near the bottom of the chest. The date on the seal read September 1863. The wax was cracked and faded. The signature at the bottom read Harlan Dietrich, Captain, Confederate Intelligence. He read the letter 3 times before the words finally made sense. Dietrich had sold information to the Union's enemies. He had revealed the position of Federal troops at Chickamauga in exchange for Confederate gold. He had caused the ambush that killed dozens of soldiers in a single night of chaos and blood. The ambush that killed Daniel. And Virgil Crane had been his messenger, carrying intelligence across the lines, betraying his own comrades for a share of the payment. "They're connected," Josiah said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, hollow and distant. "Dietrich, Virgil, Daniel's death. All of it goes back to this letter. This betrayal." Kaya placed her hand on his shoulder. She didn't speak. She understood that some truths needed silence to settle, needed space to become real. Josiah folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the chest. Then he lifted the entire container and carried it toward the cave entrance. "We take this to Fort Davis," he said. "Morrison will know what to do with it." They never made it outside. Dietrich was waiting with 8 men when they emerged from the cave. Torches flickered in the darkness, casting long shadows across the rocky ground. Rifles pointed at the narrow exit. Horses stamped nervously, sensing the violence that hung in the air like smoke before a fire. There was no escape. Virgil Crane stepped forward from behind Dietrich's horse. He was thin, gaunt, a pale scar cutting across his left cheek from eye to jaw. His smile held no warmth, only the satisfaction of a man who had waited years for this moment. "Graves," he said. "Finally. I've been dreaming about this since you left me for dead at Chickamauga. I thought you were dead. I went back for you." "You went back too late." Virgil's smile widened. "Story of your life, isn't it? Always too late. Too late to save your brother. Too late to save yourself." Josiah's hand rested on his Colt. 8 men. Too many for a fair fight. But he would take Virgil with him. That much he could do. "You killed Daniel," he said. Virgil laughed. The sound echoed off the rocks. "The boy saw me going through dead men's pockets, taking rings and coins and watches. War's expensive, Graves. A man needs to make his own opportunities. He shrugged. Daniel said he'd report me, said he'd tell you what I'd done. I couldn't let that happen, so I shot him and made it look like Confederate work. He was 18 years old. He trusted you. He was in my way. Virgil drew his pistol. Just like you're in my way now. But don't worry. I'm going to make this slow. I want you to understand exactly what's happening before you die. Dietrich spoke from behind his line of men. Enough talking, Virgil. Take the chest and kill them both. We're exposed out here. Kaya moved first. She hurled her torch at the nearest gunman. The burning brand caught him full in the face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes, and his horse reared in panic. In the chaos that followed, everything happened at once. Josiah drew his Colt and fired at Virgil. The shot took him in the right shoulder, spinning him sideways. Virgil's own shot went wild, sparking off stone. Two of Dietrich's men fired at Josiah. He dove behind a boulder as bullets whined past his head. He returned fire twice and two bodies hit the ground. Kaya had vanished into the shadows. A gunman screamed from somewhere to the left. Then another shot and silence. Three more men charged toward Josiah's position. He emptied his Colt, dropping two of them, then rolled to avoid the third man's fire. His Winchester lay 10 feet away, beside the chest of evidence. The third gunman took aim. Josiah had nothing. A carbine cracked from the darkness. The gunman jerked and fell. Kaya emerged from behind a rock formation, smoke curling from her weapon. Her face was grim, her eyes hard. Dietrich had seen enough. He spurred his horse toward the trail, trying to escape while his men died around him. Josiah grabbed his Winchester and ran. He caught Dietrich at the tree line, 200 yards from the cave. The older man heard him coming and spun in his saddle, raising a silver-plated revolver. They fired at the same moment. Dietrich's shot grazed Josiah's ribs, a line of fire across his side. Josiah's shot shattered Dietrich's knee. The horse screamed and reared. Dietrich tumbled from the saddle and crashed to the ground, clutching his ruined leg. Josiah walked toward him, his Winchester aimed at Dietrich's chest. You sold us out, he said. At Chickamauga, you gave our position to the Confederates. You got good men killed for gold. You got my brother killed. Dietrich's face was twisted with pain and fury. Your brother was nothing, he spat. A casualty of war. A number. Do you know how much money I made from that information? Do you know what I've built since then? Men like you are dust, Graves. You blow away and no one remembers. Josiah's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot. That's all it would take. Years of guilt and grief ended in a single moment. He lowered the rifle. No, he said. You don't get the mercy of a quick death. You'll hang at Fort Davis. You'll stand trial for treason and murder. You'll die with a rope around your neck, and everyone will know what you did. Every man who served at Chickamauga will know. Daniel will have justice. He turned back toward the cave. Virgil Crane was still alive. He sat slumped against a boulder, clutching his bleeding shoulder with one hand, his pistol lying useless in the dirt beside him. His smile had vanished, replaced by something desperate and afraid. Graves, he said. Wait, listen. I can explain. I can tell you things. About Dietrich. About the operation. I can help you. Josiah walked toward him. He stood over the man who had murdered his brother, the man who had let him suffer with guilt for all these years while knowing the truth. Shoot me, Virgil said. His voice cracked. Just shoot me and be done with it. I know that's what you want. Josiah holstered his Colt. No, you'll face a military tribunal. You'll be tried for murder and treason. And every day until they hang you, you'll know that I could have killed you here. And I chose to let the law do it instead. He leaned closer. That's Daniel's justice. Not a quick bullet in the dark. A slow rope in the daylight with witnesses. He walked away. Behind him, Virgil Crane began to weep. Fort Davis rose from the desert like a promise of civilization. The adobe walls glowed orange in the setting sun as Josiah and Kaya approached with their prisoners. Dietrich rode slumped over his saddle, his shattered leg bound with bloody cloth. Virgil walked with his hands tied, his shoulder wound crusted and weeping. Captain Morrison met them at the gate. His face paled as Josiah explained what had happened and what the chest contained. Dietrich sold intelligence throughout the war, Morrison said after reading the documents for an hour. This letter alone proves treason. Hundreds of deaths at Chickamauga can be traced to this information. He looked up at Josiah. This will hang him, both of them. That's all I want. Virgil Crane confessed to Daniel's murder that same night, hoping for mercy. There would be none. Josiah stood outside the guardhouse as they led the prisoners to their cells. Dietrich paused at the door and turned, his eyes burning with hatred. You think this is over, he said. I have friends everywhere. This isn't over. Josiah met his gaze without blinking. For you it is. The door closed, the locks engaged. In a chapter that had lasted since Chickamauga finally reached its end. Before leaving Fort Davis, Josiah walked to the small cemetery on the hill behind the fort. He stood among the wooden crosses and stone markers, looking for a name he knew wouldn't be there. Daniel was buried in Tennessee, in a mass grave with other casualties from Chickamauga. Josiah had never visited. He had never been able to face the stone. But standing here, in this quiet place, he spoke to his brother for the first time since that terrible night. I know the truth now, he said. I know it wasn't my fault. I know who killed you, and I know he's going to pay for it. He paused. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I blamed myself instead of looking for answers. But it's done now. You can rest. The wind stirred the dust at his feet. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle called evening assembly. Josiah touched the brim of his hat in salute. Then he turned and walked back toward his horse, where Kaya waited in silence. 2 weeks later, the horse barn had been rebuilt with fresh timber from town. The fences stood straight and strong. Josiah hammered the last nail into the new porch railing as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Hoofbeats approached from the east. Kaya rode into the yard on a painted mare she had acquired from the Mescalero families near Fort Davis. She had been gone for several days, settling matters with the remaining members of her father's people. Josiah had expected her to leave for good. She had completed what she came to do. She had no obligation to return. But here she was. He set down his hammer as she dismounted. How did it go? He asked. My people will move north, to the reservation lands. The army has promised protection? She paused. Some wanted me to go with them. Josiah nodded. You should go if that's what you want. She was quiet for a moment. The wind stirred her hair, carrying the scent of sage and dust. You remember the joke about the ring? She said. I remember. She touched the leather cord around her neck, where the silver band rested against her heart. I wasn't joking about choosing where I belong. She looked at him directly. I choose here, if you don't mind another person on this land. Josiah studied her. He thought about the past weeks, the work they had done together, the silences they had shared that needed no words, the way she moved through his world without disrupting it, fitting into spaces he hadn't known were empty. He picked up a second hammer and tossed it to her. The back fence needs mending before winter. You know how to use that? She caught it easily. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. I know how to use many things, Graves. They walked toward the fence together. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Two people who had spent their lives alone, learning what it meant to stand beside someone else. Josiah looked toward the horizon. In the distance, the Davis Mountains rose dark against the fading light. He had heard rumors of gold strikes up there, prospectors flooding into territory that had been empty for years. Gold brought people. People brought trouble. But that was a problem for another day. For now there was a fence to mend and someone to mend it with. After all the years of solitude, that was enough. More than enough.
The story leaves a profound lesson about truth, responsibility, and how people choose to confront their past. Josiah and the Apache woman not only fight tangible pursuers, but also face invisible ghosts that have haunted them for years. One lives with guilt, believing she failed to save her brother. The other lives in pursuit for carrying the truth her father left behind. Their commonality lies in the fact that both chose silence and suffering for a long time, until circumstances forced them to stand up. The greatest lesson of the story is that silence does not heal pain. Only the truth can. Josiah punished himself by living in solitude, believing he would bear the guilt for life. But when the truth was revealed, he realized that the burden had never truly belonged to him. This shows how easily people confuse responsibility with guilt. between being there and causing it. Forgiving oneself is not about escaping the past, but about facing it head-on with the truth. At the same time, the Apache woman represents another lesson. Strength lies not in brute force, but in persistently upholding evidence, beliefs, and moral values, even when it makes one a target. The story also emphasizes that true justice lies not in the moment of revenge, but in letting light shine into the darkness. Josiah had the power to kill the man who murdered his brother, but he chose the harder path, bringing the truth to justice. It was the choice of someone who had grown from suffering, understanding that a bullet can end a life, but it cannot close the chapter on history. Justice needs witnesses. It needs acknowledgement. It needs daylight. Finally, the story reminds us that people are not defined by the losses they have experienced, but by how they move forward after that loss. When Josiah and the woman chose to stand by each other, repairing the fence and rebuilding the stable, they were not just rebuilding a piece of land, but rebuilding their own lives. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from forgetting the past, but from daring to live with the truth and no longer running away from it.